let them jump in. Yeah, okay. All right, so, this is a work session tonight for the Planning Commission. Discussion of potential code amendments is the first discussion item, and I am, it's Libby, we just got started, so we haven't even started, so that's okay. No, you're not late. You're actually a minute on, before decided to jump in. And I'm thinking Wally or Tom, you want to go ahead and make a
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
discussion of this, and then we can
Sure,
see
sure.
what happens.
This first page, it's got the definitions on it. You will no doubt remember that from last month, or not last month, the month before,
Yeah.
where we discussed the buffers, and the general direction that we were given was to make them more generalized, and certainly where it appeared to make any kind of prescription to take that out. So that's essentially what we've done. Landscaping enhanced, there was concern that we ought to let the landscape plan of the developer pretty much dictate what they're going to plant. And we also talked about screening, the use of a fence or a wall to create a visual separation between two properties where landscaping cannot be utilized. I think we all sort of went to school on the legacy plan. There was a realization that a wall probably would have worked pretty well at the end of that stub road on Legacy, where we only had 5 feet of buffer, instead of maybe saying, I mean, naturally wooded is fine, but it was only 5 feet of it. So a wall would have definitely been something that would have been useful there. Let's see, tree, we pretty much kept the tree definition. One thing I do want to direct you to is that we got rid of distinction between a large and a small shrub. Our feeling there was that, that can cause a whole lot of problems down the road in determining what's large and what's small, so.
If a shrub grows to be 12 feet, that's one heck of a shrub.
Well, yes, and what we said, and I'll get to that later in the ordinance, but what we said is we wanted a shrub that would at least grow to 6 feet in the case of naturally wooded buffers.
Yeah.
Now, of course, as we attack other areas of zoning ordinance, it may be far less. We may not have that requirement, but for this, we did. You'll notice what Thomas and I did today is we marked out a 40-foot area, a 400 square foot area, 20 by 20. You'll see those cones, and that's basically what we're talking about as we move forward. Thought a visual would be helpful, and so we ran that Public Works and commandeered some cones. So that was a good idea. I have to give Tom some credit on that one. Let's see. We got a very general definition of landscaping, which is a combination of both trees and shrubs with grass or other non-woody plants, which basically amounts to flowers, interspersed between the shrubs, trees and shrubs. We give a lot of latitude to developer to decide what they're going to use, whether it's grasses or flowers or whatever. We also added a definition of a meadow because in open areas, they don't have to necessarily all be planted in woods. Meadows are very important ecologically too. If there's a meadow, I'm not talking about the naturally wooded buffers now, but I'm talking about the open space in general. If there are meadows, they're certainly worth keeping. They perform a very useful function as well. Gosh, I tell you, that's about all I did with the definition. We can certainly discuss them if you want to. We're moving into the text. But I tried, one other definition that I added was enhanced state. We used we used the wording enhanced state in our ordinance. But that's simply just a landscaped or meadow area installed and not natural pre-development. That's just one that you would install.
At least you've given some structure to a very,
Yeah.
subjective subject, so I think
Right.
it's.
Well, yeah, the idea is just to kind of explain what we mean, because what we found out Legacy went through the last time is that we weren't really clear on what we meant.
This is good, I think it's nice, yeah.
Like in one area, they had the 60-foot buffer reduced to 25, and they offered enhanced landscaping. I don't know what that means. I mean, I think we will know what that means now. What it means is they're not going to do anything. That's what it means. But anyway, getting into the text, I want to try the more general text first, which is 8.2. Now, this is Planned Development District generally. This will affect both the waterfront PUD, which, I don't know if I have one of those or not. PUD mixed-use zoning district, which is, of course, Legacy and the surrounding area. In fact, let me pull up a slide right quick. I promise I'm going to sit back down, but it seemed like for discussion, it might be good to discuss the area that we're really looking at. Now, an area down here was added later, and I'll get to that in a second, but that's really our PUD mixed-use overlay district. You can see that most of it is devoted to Legacy. There is an area in Village Commercial that could be activated for PUD-MU, although it's important to point out that some of that is already taken up by Legacy, and the rest of it's taken up by our building that we're in right now. So there is area across the street, underlying zoning of general commercial and research and development. But I think you can see there's not a whole lot of area that we're talking about that's going to be the subject of this ordinance. I don't know if we'll get another planned unit development or not. But certainly Legacy is taking up the lion's share of what we got. And this is just a close-up of the Legacy development. You can see where we added that section in there. But Legacy goes pretty well into the Village commercial area, and that is Bob Moses over in that area. So anyway, that's the maps. I'll get into more specifics later, but those are the maps. The point I'm trying to make is that it's just, as far as the city's concerned, it's a rather small area. Not that it's not important. That's why we're here tonight. Okay. Under 8.2-2, I did some formatting changing just because some of this is a mouthful to read through. But the important part of this is the applicant may request that any requirements in Article 8-3 or 8-4 be modified if it is found, and then again, numbers to break out language. This is largely what our current ordinance says, and I have not changed it because I wanted us to maybe have a discussion about it. One, that the requirements are inconsistent with planned development design principles. Well, certainly we would want everything to be consistent with those principles. I think where the argument comes in is, are buffers reasonably, are they inconsistent with planned development design principles? I would say probably not. But nevertheless, the modification was made, and that's what we live with. That the modification is consistent, and you'll notice I got rid of waiver or, because waivers are talked about specifically in Article 8-4, which we'll get to in a minute. That the modification is consistent with the intent and purposes of the planned development district under the particular circumstances. Well, again, those are pretty hefty requirements, I would argue. I don't know, I wasn't here, so I don't know what exactly transpired in 2015. It was obviously felt that that the modifications that were granted as part of the overall approval of the master plan were in fact consistent and with the intents and purposes and consistent with the plan development design principles. Okay. I added a new paragraph. I didn't really add it, I just broke it off. Subsequent to the approval of the master plan, and this is how Legacy came back to us, any additional modifications of the requirements of the zoning, subdivision, site plan, and sign ordinances must be reviewed by the Planning Commission and City Council pursuant to 8.2-7 and 8.2-8. So in other words, any change after the master plan is approved has to come back through the Planning Commission and City Council. That's how we ended up looking at the Legacy modification several years back. It's actually been 2 years, like last month, but anyway. Plan development is I've pretty much left that alone. But 8-2-5, you'll notice that in place of city manager, I put zoning administrator, which here happens to be the city manager, or authorized representative. I wanted to get in sync with the state code language.
So the zoning administrator is the city planner?
Manager, yes.
City manager.
Yes, Randy Wheeler is the zoning administrator, and will be for the foreseeable future. I have been a zoning administrator in the past, but I do things a little bit different. With me. Okay. In the requirements for a plan under 8.2-5, the second page on though, you'll notice there's a bunch of things that we require, that we currently require. I did add at the last of it a lighting plan. And the reason I will cover what's in a lighting plan, I've actually put it in our site plan ordinance for now. But a lighting plan basically talks about adequate lighting. Generally, bleed over light off the site is minimized to like a half-foot candle, which is something you can measure as opposed to nits that you really.
I'm sorry, what number are you on, Wally?
I'm on 13. It would be slightly blue. It's more purple than blue. But it's in your documents, it may be just a lighter black.
8.2-13.
13. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
If the planning commission desires it, I could certainly bring back more specifics for you next time. I didn't think of printing that off. I should have. It would have been helpful, but essentially, a lighting plan consists of a photometric map that shows the lighting values over the property and shows the spillover going into adjoining properties. And again, you want to minimize spillover, and you also want to have adequate lighting throughout the site. I'll tell you one thing we ran in with Legacy in phase 1 is we found out, in looking at the plan, that they didn't have any lighting proposed for any of their alleyways. Well, the alleyways happen to be going past a lot of the stormwater management BPs. So you can imagine driving down a dark road on an alley and finding yourself, halfway underwater. Now, Legacy understood that, and they did correct that. Fine. But, all I could really point to right now is adequate lighting, which clearly didn't seem adequate to me. But and they agreed, to their credit. Pre-application conferences, I'll cover this more when we get into subdivision stuff, which we're not doing tonight. But the new state codes tell us that we cannot require a pre-application. But one is strongly advised, someone is strongly advised to do that because that is their chance to sit down with staff and assess their plan and see what the possible roadblocks will be and all those sort of things.
Why isn't it a requirement? It's
State code changed back in, it's been several years. Back in 2018, I believe, and Andy probably knows about this too. But basically a pre-application, we cannot require a pre-application. We can strongly advise it though. Is that your understanding, Andy? I want to make sure. Okay.
Certainly sort of recommend, say, hey, here's an opportunity, we
Yeah.
recommend that you do this, take advantage of it, kind of thing.
Somebody
But
would
we
be
can't-
foolish not to, in my
Right.
opinion.
But we can't mandate that they do a pre-application before they file their application.
Right. So we got rid of the word shall and said a strongly. Okay, everything else is just basically zoning administrator or authorized representative. We did add, and I'm sorry to do this to you, 8.2-12, we did add some language. Our current language did not cover basically everything that we require. We need to determine, of course, that the grading is determined to be consistent with the approved application plan. We also need a stormwater permit being issued and a stormwater pollution plan, sometimes called a SWIP, being approved. That is state code, and we've got the under 8.2-13, I tried to update the fees for what they would be the last time I looked through here. The important thing here, though, is that fees will be adjusted annually if necessary to reflect the consumer price index determined by the federal government rounded to the next dollar. That's six.
That's smart.
Wally, question, are these fees the existing fees now?
They are the
And
existing
can be
fees
adjusted?
now, yes.
Okay.
Now, in July 1st, they will change again because every year,
Right.
beginning July 1st, would go up.
Right.
And I will, before we put this to copy, I'll get the new fees and make sure we're up to date on that. But they will change yearly. That's why we put in the,
Number 6, yeah.
okay. Yes, ma'am.
Just out of curiosity, I notice here that it requires 20 copies.
Yes.
What in the world?
Well, think about it. We've got to have copies for staff to review. We've also got to have copies for the planning commission, and we've got to have copies for the council. You start adding up all those, and it adds up pretty quick. We'll probably end up printing more than 20. Yeah.
Probably make another 10 yourself.
Yeah, probably so. Absolutely.
Wally, who is considered to be an authorized representative?
Well, right now, I am the authorized representative to approve sign permits.
Right, okay,
Right
that's
now,
all I was.
I'm not authorized to grant waivers or anything like that. In fact, staff is not authorized to grant a lot of waivers. That goes through you guys and the city council. But in the future, there may be some additional that are delegated down to us at the staff level. So I just put that in there. It is a power that the zoning administrator has anyway. We don't even have to have it in there. The zoning administrator, one of his powers conferred by the state is that the zoning administrator, he can appoint a representative to represent him in anything to do with the zoning ordinance. So we're just trying to be clear there, that's all. He has that power already.
The best page is a blue page.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, I'll start with Article 8.4, which is the mixed-use overlay district, which I basically, well, just to remind you again. If you Just to remind you one more time, that's the area that we're looking at. That is the mixed-use overlay district, along with, you can flip it forward one. Along with that area, you'll see in the back of Legacy that was added into the PUD MU earlier in 2015. Okay. This will be a mouthful, and I'll probably need the PowerPoint. That's where I'll probably need to get to the PowerPoint. Okay, mixed-use development programs, instead of should, I said shall address the following objectives. I mean, they have to address these following objectives. They promote a more efficient land use of land over conventional development. This is certainly true. Produces superior quality in the development, design, and construction. That's certainly what's represented to us. Produces a pedestrian-friendly environment to reduce vehicular trips within the community. If Legacy is built according to plan, which I'm sure it will be, that will be the case. Create an appropriately balanced mix of residential and non-residential uses that respects the underlying land use objectives of the comprehensive plan. You'll remember a lot of people came out when we did the amendment of the buffers. They were very upset that this was no longer a mixed use development. Well, it is. There's still an apartment component to it. There's still a commercial, albeit fairly small. There still is a commercial element to it. There's a townhome commercial to it, and there's a single-family home. So that's what we mean by a mix of residential and non-residential uses. Provide alternate housing choices and opportunities, which I think this will do. Promote the assemblage of smaller parcels to enhance a unified development complex otherwise not achievable through traditional independent development practices. Well, they took 27 properties to put them into these phases. It's going to be built in like 5 or 6 different phases. Commercial will be 2 phases. The apartment will be 1 phase, and then phase 2 and 3, which is single-family homes. But they're getting a boundary line adjustment that's going through our review right now that will put those properties together. So that's where F comes from. Okay, permitted use is residential. We didn't make a whole lot of changes here, except to say the parks and playgrounds, clubhouses, non-commercial recreation are subject to federal safety standards and ADA requirements, which is certainly true. Accessory uses and structures, including a home occupation. Really, 1-7 talks about conditional uses, so we got rid of that. 1-23 talks about conditional uses, and Article 14 of the city zoning ordinance talks about home businesses. Next page over, we get to 8.4-4. I'm just trying to get you centered in the page. You'll notice that up above that, I put hospitals, okay, with 1-7, hotels and motels, okay, with 1-7. That is just a note to myself, really. 1-7 says that hospitals, hotels, and motels will only be approved with a conditional use permit. What we've said here is that it's permitted by conditional use permit, but if you do it as part of the master plan, we'll basically wrap it all up into one. So I think we're okay there. Okay, the mouthful. 8.4-5, perimeter buffers and open space. I spent a lot of time on this. We all did, Aaron and Thomas and myself, looking over this because we all know this is where we had our problems and our disagreements when we went through the amendment process. Okay, a 40-foot wide landscaped or naturally wooded buffer, which we define, and we also define landscape, shall be maintained around the perimeter of the project area and can be included in the open space requirement. Okay, naturally wooded buffer. Most of our PUD, even the stuff across the street, is going to end up with a naturally wooded buffer. There are going to be very few gaps. We spend a lot of time talking about gaps, but in actuality, we're probably not going to have a lot of gaps. Okay. B, landscaping shall be required in cases where a naturally wooded buffer, as defined in this ordinance, is not present. Landscaping planning shall generally be calculated at the following rate per 400 square feet, what you see by the cones. Now, we say general because that's generally what we're looking for, but we may tweak according to how much square footage of gap we have. And I'll get into that in a minute. Okay. 1 canopy tree, 2 understories, and 3 shrubs per 400 square feet generally. Now, that comes directly from Department of Environmental Quality, so it is based on something that's out there. It's not just made up. In lieu of a canopy tree, Ms. Gray brought this up last month, and it was a very, very good comment to make. In lieu of a canopy tree, an additional understory tree and shrub may be planted. We understand that a canopy tree may be too tall in certain areas where you have lines. And in fact, some understory trees might be. We might be looking at something like crepe myrtles, and, we could determine that as part of the pre-application meeting, what they'll plant in there. I mean, we want to be flexible. We do want to be flexible, and we understand that there's a right tree in the right place kind of idea about. Got to give credit, Aaron some credit for helping with that one. So, okay. This is the mouthful, and I think I can explain it. For areas not evenly divisible by 400 square feet, which wouldn't be 800, wouldn't be 1,200, wouldn't be 1,600. The closest combination of canopy trees, understories, and shrubs to a one-to-one relationship of square footage of planting space to square feet needed for planting shall be required. I can explain that. Where planting space exceeds the square footage available, shrubs less than 6 feet in the height at maturity may be used, because we're talking about survivability here. We want everything to survive. Where planting space is less than square footage available, the remaining square foot shall be planted in grass or non-wood plants. Let me go to this and try to explain this. I'll just advance this the old-fashioned way. Okay, what do I mean by one-to-one relationship? Well, let's take that 400 square foot that we see out there marked by the cones. Each canopy tree takes about 130 square feet of planting space. Each understory tree takes about 90 square feet of planting space. And each shrub takes about 30 square feet of planting space. If you add that all together, one canopy tree, 2 understory trees, and 3 shrubs, you get 400 square feet. That is a one-to-one relationship. Okay, so we would say that there is a one-to-one relationship between square footage, 400, and area needed for plantings, which is 400 square feet. But we've also said that in lieu of a canopy tree, you can plant an understory tree and shrubs. So if we took away that canopy tree and we put in an additional understory tree, that gives 3 total understory trees and 4 total shrubs, we get the same 400 square feet, but we only get 390 square feet in required planting space. In other words, we've taken away 130 feet of planting space, and we've added back in 120 feet, because 30 feet for a shrub and 90 feet for an understory. So that would be permissible under the ordinance. The remaining 10 square feet would be planted in grass or other non-woody plantings. Could be grass, could be flowers, could be one of those others. Okay, so that's what we mean by one-to-one relationship. Now, I also took a few other areas just as examples, okay? Let's take 300 square feet. That's less than that 400 that you're looking at there. You could have 2 understory trees, which would be 180 square feet, 90 feet for each planting space, and 4 shrubs, which would be 120 square feet at 30 foot. 180 plus 120 equals 300. So you can get the 300 without having an overage or underage. So you can get there. And remember, that's not even using the canopy tree, because canopy trees we know can be substituted by understory trees and shrubs. Okay, and also remember, there's to be a mixture of planting types to the maximum extent possible, which is why we go with 2 understory trees and 4 shrubs. We want there to be a mix, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Let's take 750 square feet, not divisible by 400. You can get to exactly 750 square feet. You can do it with 6 understory trees and 7 shrubs. You can get exactly there. Now, if you were going to plant a canopy tree, you may be 10 feet off. But we tried to stilt this towards requiring understory trees, canopy trees were just sort of, gravy in a way. Okay, so we can get exactly 750 square feet. 500 square feet. Let's say you planted 2 canopy trees, 2 understory trees, and 2 shrubs. That's the ultimate mixture, right? 2 and 2. You would get, I'll put 50 square feet, it should be 500 square feet. 260 plus 180 plus 60 equals 500 square feet. But let's take another example. Follow me here. If 1 canopy tree was substituted by 1 more understory tree and 1 shrub, you would only get 490 square feet in planting area. That's okay, because you're allowed to do that substitution by ordinance. 490 is as close as we can get if that allowed substitution occurs. The remaining 10 square feet would be planted in grass or non-woody plantings, or non-woody planting, which, again, is flowers. And there are ways that you could do it without planting any understories, any canopy trees and all understory trees and shrubs. I mean, we could handle that. We would probably, we would do 1 understory tree and maybe 2 shrubs to get closer, but I'll, let me move forward here. Okay, here's one that can go either way. I took 200 square feet. I guess we need to figure out what the minimum square feet is that we're going to look at. But 200 square feet, you could do 0 canopy trees, 1 understory tree, and 1 shrub. Okay, so that would get you to 210 square feet. Or you could do 1 canopy tree and 2 shrubs, which would get you at 190 square feet, where you're within 10 feet either way. So you could do 190 or 210. If you did 190, the remainder would be in grass or non-woody plantings. If you did 210, the shrub size that we would require would be reduced to ensure survivability. That's the main goal we're at here, is to make sure that these plants survive. We could require, and other ordinances out there do, we could require all kinds of fancy plantings. But how are they going to survive? That's the question. We want them to survive until maturity. Okay.
I have a question, Wally.
Sure.
As we
Lot of
look at
math, sorry.
200 square feet, 400, 900, and so forth, it's the same width, right? Because we're talking about a buffer?
We're talking about a 40-foot wide buffer in
Right,
this
so
case.
in order to get the square footage, the 40 feet remains the same width, but now you're talking about the length of the buffer. Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, if you were to take this as part of the 40-foot, 20 would be basically clear, and 20 would be clear up here. So really, it's just, you've got a naturally wooded buffer behind it, but you have this gap. That's a naturally wooded buffer. And so that's what we're really concerned about, and we know it won't always go out to 400. In fact, you'll probably rarely come out to exactly 400. But the point I'm trying to make is that we can do the calculations to get pretty doggone close, no matter what. Now, one thing we might want to discuss is that, does this constitute a big enough gap for us to even worry about landscaping? Does 200 square feet constitute enough of a gap for us to even worry about landscaping? What is the cutoff? Is it 400 square feet right out the nose? Maybe it is. I don't know. That's the, I didn't really touch that because I thought that was just something I'd kind of try to get some feedback from the Planning Commission on. You can see this is a pretty big area here. I mean, it may not be as big as what you would visualize with 400 square feet. I don't know how you envision it, but it's a pretty solid clear area. Okay, so that's that's basically my explanation of 8.5, or 8.4-5. Now, I do direct your attention to number 3 under here that says the 40-foot perimeter buffer can be waived, and I put in here upon application by the developer, by the city council with the proposed district's perimeter boundary lines adjacent to property subject to the same PUD MU district designation. Let me tell you how that would work. Tell you how it did work. basically, all of this area in here, let me go back one more, I'm sorry. Basically, all this area in here, well, at least in here, back to that first pond that they're building, of course, now they're clearing it, is adjacent to PUD MU area. They could have asked for all of this to be waived. What they asked for instead was for a modification so that they would allow 40-foot buffers and then that little 5-foot that we got where that road is, which I can't place right now. It's hard enough to look sideways. Yes, ma'am.
Was the 40-foot buffer established with the planned unit development? Is that when 40-foot buffers came into play?
Yes, it is a requirement of the planned unit development.
Is that the only zoning that requires a 40-foot buffer? Is that correct?
Well, there is a 40-foot buffer for the planned open space.
And the open space, so they are both
subdivisions.
one and the same?
But they're kind of different because this says naturally wooded buffer. The buffer in planned open space development just says buffer. It doesn't really say that it has to be all in trees or naturally wooded or, to me, it would be a combination of existing trees probably in meadow areas and maybe require some landscaping. But I mean, we generally don't do that with planned open space developments.
And the 40-foot was determined because of what? Why 40 feet, not 30, not 50? I mean, how did 40 come?
Well, that's a question, and I'm not sure I can really come down and answer you because that was done before I got here. But I know that this ordinance was modeled on a lot of other similar type ordinances, and I think the 40-foot probably came along with it. If you think about it, 40 feet is really not that big of a buffer. I mean, out in the wild, I mean, you can traverse the area from one of these cones, 40 feet pretty quickly. But I'm not sure exactly how 40 foot came into being. I can find out though.
No, I still keep going back to that open space development. That's where I
Right.
keep circling back to that.
Yeah.
Ask that question.
Right, gotcha. But the point I was trying to make with this slide is that they didn't really have to put a buffer here. They could have applied for it to be waived. City council may or may not have waived it. Judging how it went, they probably
Why
would have
didn't
waived
they
it.
have to put a buffer there?
Well, because they're adjoining other property that's in the PUD MU overlay district. I'm sorry, I'm not talking to my mic. So
The
that,
western boundary, the far western boundary
okay.
is
the
a
far-
40, I misunderstood you then. I thought that was a 40-foot buffer down that line.
There is a 40-foot buffer on this side.
Okay. And where
Yes.
did they ask for the modification?
They asked for it back in this area. They'd already gotten it in this area. And they asked for it back here. They asked for it here where that road was coming out. And they asked for it way up front here where you had the commercial, the future commercial development.
Technically, they were supposed to be 40 feet as well. Is that correct? Like on that
Yes.
southern border?
Unless the applicant applies for a waiver, yes, they were required
It
to
was
put that.
required, okay.
Yes. They chose to go to modification route because they did want to have some landscaping. They didn't want to get rid of all of it. Of course, that's when we had the big discussion about what is landscaping. But anyway, and I can probably show you better on this. Yeah, buffer modification was right here. You remember they withdrew the buffer modification for back here. They withdrew that. And then they asked for where that road goes in, I guess, somewhere in that area. Might be that area. That's the Buddy Bridge, back there. And then they asked for a modification along that area as well. So that's what they asked for, and they did get them. They did get the modifications when they went back through the public process. Okay. Last meeting, which I thought was an excellent comment. They are one of the uses that are allowed in open space. walls or fencing where you cannot achieve landscape. So, and we even, in the back part of this, we even talk about fences and walls that are used for landscaping can be up to 6 feet in height instead of the 4 feet that's mentioned in the ordinance. That's under 8.4 dash,
8 what?
8.4-10. So I think what would happen now is if Legacy was coming in with a similar buffer, what we'd say in that area is that if you want landscaping, that's fine, but we also want a wall, or we want some screening in place so that, that road doesn't end right at Oxford Run where everybody can see it. And the last thing I'll really cover is 8.4-11, minimum architectural design. To me, personally, now this is a personal note, and this may not have any cachet beyond our conversation today, if it even has that. But I thought one of the biggest things Legacy asked for when they went through with their modifications was a change in the architectural design. But that's why it went through the public hearing process and did ultimately get it approved. But what I've done is I've said at the very least they need to have windows, balconies, bay windows, and articulated massing. What articulated massing is basically not a flat front. You have some areas recessed from others, so you have some articulation there in the fronts. And of course, other elements may also be included. That's pretty bare bones. I mean, asking for those things, pretty bare bones, I think. Well,
Quality of materials or the kind of materials?
that's a very good comment. We don't really talk about the materials, but maybe we should. I mean, if you wanted a stone material or stone facade, I guess, or a brick facade, we could certainly look at that.
Well, I just think that if you're trying to create an upscale look, that the quality of materials and the type of material goes a long way to speak to that.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you. I think it's very good.
I know in our development, the HOA has rules about what type of materials you can use and so forth.
And so does Legacy.
So I don't know how they get, approved when it's originally done, but, like I remember one up in Reston, every thing had to be done in wood. They wanted to be very, woodsy type people up in Reston. And of course, that invited every termite in town, but anyway, I find the HOA documents usually cover a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, and Legacy did submit some design guidelines when they went through the first time, and a lot of that was taken into their homeowners documentation. What was not taken into their homeowners documentation was the kind of stuff that I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
Like windows and balconies and that.
I don't know that you want to leave it up to the homeowners association to determine the quality of materials on facades that you were requiring here. I think that should be something that should come under the ordinance.
Well, I would think it'd be approved first. I mean, the HOA has to be approved, and then you have to abide by it.
But we
I don't
could
know when
say,
the HOA comes into the approval
Well,
process.
I'm not sure what HOA you're talking about, if you're talking about a homeowners association.
Yeah,
That gets developed, that comes into and Andy, you help me here, when a project is gonna go into the covenants, exactly. They're more of a covenant to the community rather than a requirement to be built that way.
Well, they can be included in the declaration of covenants, when a homeowners association is typically established, documents that is recorded in the land records with sort of their development plan is the declaration of covenants that lays out how the various development or developed lots can be built, what their requirements are for building materials, design, things
Okay.
like that.
So that would.
They don't have to be, but a lot of times they are
Right,
included in
right.
that.
Well, I know a lot of the old HOAs don't speak to that. I mean,
Right.
It's not a requirement.
Yeah, the HOA documents with Lex, we're required to have.
That
some of
information
that-
in them.
some of that information. Along with their setbacks that were approved as part of the master plan and all that. You know, the thing about a master plan, it's meant to be fluid. You know, I thought about whether we ought to put in setback requirements. That's really up to the city council to decide. That's about,
I speak to that again. I know that people are very upset over the apartments that are coming in, and I have no idea what they look like. I mean, I haven't looked at them, but if you ride around town now, our area is becoming cities of apartment complexes everywhere you turn. And it's evident that some just have a better look. You know, they have the balconies, they have the bays, they have different types of material that make them more attractive than others, and they look like high quality products as opposed to some that are low. And so if there's no ordinance to capture some of that, then I think that we're missing the boat in allowing plain Janes into the area, so to speak, instead of creating an upscale look.
I think the only thing that we were really presented about the apartment, on Miami Beach, they were pretty tall. They were, if I'm,
Ones that are going in are four-story?
up to 4-story, yes. But now, what the final build ought to be, we really don't have an idea. We probably won't.
So we don't know what they're gonna look like yet? There's no rendition on them? I have no idea what they're gonna look like?
We don't know what the apartment's gonna look like. We have an idea based on part of the public hearing that approved the legacy development, but it's probably not a whole lot to go on, because again, those apartments looked like they were built, you know, near a resort area. So I don't know. I don't know what kind of guarantees we have.
I think as we move forward, that is something that we need to really take into consideration, because I don't know how much property is out there that by right can have apartments built, but I do think that there should be some design quality materials and facades that have to be met. We're laying down what kind of tree it's gotta be and how
Right.
tall a tree's gotta be.
Right.
But we're letting massive apartment complexes, and we have no idea what it's gonna look like.
Well, and that would be something that when we get to our R3 zoning, that is the district that we allow the multifamily and the apartments in, that we may need to look.
Saturday, I was up in Williamsburg, and the ones around Moortown Road, where the antique mall, they're awful looking. They're all just great big boxes.
Down boxes.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think we definitely, if we could exert
Sure.
anything, yeah, because we wouldn't want something like that.
That's not what
Absolutely.
we get.
Yeah.
Right. That's all I got. Believe it or not, that's a lot. Feast on it. Please do not hesitate to call me if you have any questions or any comment. This is a fluid document still, and
One of the things, if I can make a comment, is that
Sure.
when your opening remarks, you said that basically you've gone through this with the legacy program, which is the only PUD that we have right now,
Right.
and the likelihood of enough space to have another one, but at least, if they do, you've reset your definitions, so you don't have that problem again. I
Exactly.
understood that to be the issue, why we're looking at all these definitions and
That
so
was
forth,
that was a big issue.
is because you've been there before,
Oh, yeah,
okay?
absolutely.
Did yeoman's work. That was tough.
Thank you, and I will point out that, you know, the planning commission had a hard time with it too, and the city council had a hard time too, that we just didn't really have definitions that we could really, you know, pin ourselves. But I think we're heading in the right direction.
Um, We can certainly do it. And, anybody have any more discussion on this particular thing? There's one other thing, and I think this is probably what is going to be on the agenda for July. Is that what that is, the July Imagination Land Daycare CUP?
Yes, that is going to go into where the Tabernacle Church is. Their establishment burned down, as I understand it. So they
Yes.
needed an emergency placement, and what we agreed to do was let them go into the Methodist Church for promise, which they fulfilled, of applying for a conditional. So they're probably up and running already, but that's okay, because we've got the permit. And for y'all that don't know, anybody who's been under a rock, we have a new member of our team here, Thomas Canella, who is already, in my opinion, making our department stronger. So
Not surprised at that at all.
Thank you.
I think we're all looking forward to working with Thomas, because knowing him, I know he will do an excellent job.
Trying to get in my
Not worried
head,
about-
so you were not the.
I was already happy to see that we got on Thursday our agenda for this
Danielle.
work session. That was nice, because it gives you a little.
remember Mr. Stevens too this time.
Very good. And then we have election of officers in July,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So we shall be prepared to.
And Thomas will probably be the one y'all listen to for Imagination Land.
Okay, good, very good.
We'll mix it up.
Aaron? I've been introduced before, but my name
Yes.
is Erin Mixon,
Yes.
and I'm the new environmental compliance officer since March.
Aaron, what's your last name?
Mixon?
Nixon, oh, that's right.
Yes, I knew she- All right, well, hopefully we'll have a nice, stable department now with good people here on board, and hopefully they'll stay, and
They're not allowed to leave until I leave.
July meeting is,
July meeting.
We will, and the planning commission will be making a determination that
ERIN? Okay.
Oh,
Most of the other.
recommendation.
all right, then, I think if nothing else, I guess we could call this over.
do the cows.
I only had to use that thing one time.
I mean, not tonight.